Well, hello and welcome to our special coverage of India's 79th Independence Day. I'm Ashmit Kumar. Now, Prime Minister Modi, in his Independence Day speech, made a big announcement promising a huge gift during Diwali, where the government is set to usher in the next generation of GST reforms to reduce the tax burden on the common man. Let's hear out what the Prime Minister had to say.
पिछले 8 साल से हमने जीएसटी का बहुत बड़ा रिफॉर्म किया। पूरे देश में टैक्स के बर्डन को कम किया, टैक्स की व्यवस्थाओं को सरल किया और 8 साल के बाद समय की मांग है कि हम एक बार उसको रिव्यू करें। हमने एक हाई पावर कमेटी को बिठा करके रिव्यू शुरू किया, राज्यों से भी विचार विमर्श किया और मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, हम नेक्स्ट जनरेशन जीएसटी रिफॉर्म्स लेकर के आ रहे हैं। ये दिवाली के अंदर आपके लिए तोहफा बन जाएंगे। सामान्य मानवीय की जरूरतों के टैक्स भारी मात्रा में कम कर दिए जाएंगे।
Well, the big announcement there coming in from the Prime Minister, promising a double dhamaka as far as GST reforms is concerned. And minutes after the announcement by the Prime Minister, we had a tweet being put out by the Finance Ministry, which details the extent of the reforms that will be undertaken, chief amongst them being that there will be a 2-slab format going forward as far as GST reforms are concerned. A 2-slab structure is now what we're looking at. In fact, joining us now to tell us more about it, on what this structure may perhaps look like, what the Finance Ministry is indicating, Timsy Jaipuria, my colleague, joining us to tell us about these changes. Timsy.
Well, yes, as you rightly said, minutes after PM's speech, there was a detailed tweet that has been put out by the Finance Ministry. It talks about what are these structural reforms that the government is looking at. There are 3 pillars to these reforms. First pillar, the structural reforms, that is inverted duty structure correction, resolving classification issues. And third is stability and predictability here. Next, on rate rationalization. The second pillar of these reforms is rate rationalization. The key there, reduction of taxes on common man. That is to reduce taxes, to bring in more affordability, to boost consumption, and to make essential and aspirational goods more accessible to a wider population. Next point under this second pillar of rate rationalization, essentially moving towards a simple tax with 2-slab structure. Remember, government has been saying since the inception of GST in 2017 that it will be a simple tax, and the industry has been waiting, people have been waiting, and thus they have now laid out the roadmap for a simple tax. This will be in 2-slab structure. However, when we see the detail of this 2-slab structure, we actually come down to 3 only. That is, one is the standard rate, one is a merit rate, and the third will be special rate only for select few items. So overall, yes, a 2-slab structure, standard and merit, but yes, there will be a special rate also, which will be only for a select few items, which in the current roadmap, which is ongoing, the 4-slab structure, we have a 28% plus cess. The cess is levied only on select few items, the sin goods. So will this cess items be replicated in the special rates? Again, a clarity yet to be emerged. Remember, compensation cess is ending this financial year. The payouts of the back-to-back loans that were taken to assist the states in the COVID years to overcome the revenue loss that was happening, that cess is expiring. The payouts are ending, and thus government says the end of compensation cess has created fiscal space, providing greater flexibility to rationalize and align rates with the GST framework for long-term stability and sustainability. So that is the key there, the window that is coming from compensation cess. But again, questions that are coming to the minds of experts is what happens to the states' revenues? Will states agree? Because GST Reform Agenda is unfinished till the time states agree to these reforms in the council meeting. States will have to argue on the basis of their potential revenue loss.
Right, Timsy.
Because compensation cess was alone being given to states to compensate them. So that is again a key there. 2-slab structure broken down to 3. And yes, third is ease of living. That is by easing registration, making the return process simpler, and
Right,
refunds.
Tanzi, I'll just have to come in. There are a lot of questions, like you said, that need answering at this stage. States, will they be on board? What will this structure look like? What is this classification going to be? In fact, our managing editor, Shereen Bhan, is also joining us. Shereen, in the broadcast earlier this morning after the Prime Minister's speech, we had tax experts talking about perhaps a merger of the 12 and 18% slab. Now a curveball being thrown. A very different structure is what we're looking at. 2 slabs and a special rate. How significant is this reform being proposed by the Finance Ministry?
Well, it is going to be pretty significant, but what we will have to see is what are the rates that they arrived at as far as the standard rate is concerned, as well as the merit rate. And, as Timothy was pointing out, the highest bracket currently, which is the 28% slab, it was meant to be only for select items. That basket saw the inclusion of a whole host of items, including things like cement, etc., which don't qualify as luxury or sin goods. So the question now is this select item basket. Will that be a large basket? Will it be select is the question. And what will the rate be on the select item list? Will that be higher than the current highest slab is the question. But let's bring in our experts, Ashmit. I had this conversation with the former CBEC chief, Najib Shah, on the day that the GST had marked its latest milestone on its anniversary on the 1st of July. Mr. Shah, appreciate you joining us here. Now clarity, one, that the government has arrived at a proposal, the central government making it clear that they have arrived at a proposal. They have sent their proposal to the GOM. They are suggesting a 2-rate slab, standard merit, plus a select item basket with a special rate. What would your expectation be now, Mr. Shah, as we move towards this 3-rate structure and the revenue neutral rate? In your assessment, where would we be?
I think a lot of questions rather than answers at this point of time. As rightly pointed out, there are challenges. The 2-rate structure is much, much better than whatever anybody anticipated. We are all arguing that we should have at least 3 rates only. And okay, well, we are still talking of the select goods being at a 3rd rate, in which case we'll continue to have 3 rates. But we were looking at a merger of 12 and 18 and 28 continuing being there and 5 perhaps moving towards 8, 10, so that at the end of it all, revenue will be a concern for both the center and the states. And how the states are going to buy in this particular proposal, we'll have to wait and see. One more surprising thing is that the proposal seems to have been mooted by the center rather than it coming from the GOM, where the participation of opposition states is also there. That would have made the whole thing more acceptable, palatable in the council itself. So the council meeting will be critical. The FM's role and the center's role will be critical as to how they're going to assuage concerns of revenue. But it is huge. It is huge, and it is welcome from a tax administrator's perspective, because the lesser the rates, the lesser the challenges of classification, the lesser the challenges of dispute. And this is the way the roadmap of GST ought to have been a little earlier, but never late. It's never late for good news.
Yes, it certainly is never late for changes, and especially changes that will make things easier from an administration point of view, but also the idea, as the Prime Minister said and the Finance Ministry statement says, is to boost consumption. Now, my question, Mr. Shah, is that if the 12 and 18 were to be merged, what could that midpoint be? What happens to 28? Does 28 move up? There was speculation that perhaps we could see a rate like a 35% rate coming in. And I remember one of the concerns that you and Tarun Bajaj, when we had spoken last, had raised, that there should not be a very significant difference between the standard and the merit rate. What would your thoughts be on that, given a 2-rate structure?
I continue to maintain that same position, that there should not be too much of a gap between the standard and the merit rate. Now, the 5 necessarily will have to move up. I'm looking strictly now from a revenue perspective. Our major revenue provider is the 18-rate slab. If you are now going to merge the 18 and 12 and bring it towards 15, you are necessarily going to lose revenue from a bunch of commodities which were revenue givers for you. Now, will the movement from 12 to 15 compensate for the loss from the 18% slab coming down 15? Has to be seen. I'm sure the finance ministry will be working on that. Similarly, if we are now looking at the common man's goods, then 5% ought to continue, but that will hurt revenue hugely because there has to be necessarily, in my opinion, some movement of 5 towards 8 or 10, which again will be a political call ultimately to be made by the government as to whether they're happy with moving 5 to 10. And as regards 28, I think if the cess has to merge with 28, we're looking at a rate much higher than 28 because remember, the cess also provides a huge amount of revenue both to the states, which revenue now will be gone, and they will need to be suitably compensated with higher rates somewhere, whereby they continue to get the same amount of revenue. So I think the states will be extremely concerned and would like to look at the details before they plunge into commenting upon this development. But all said and done, there's a happy news. It's good news for the reform itself.
Yes, let me bring in Abhishek Rastogi as well. Abhishek, many thanks for joining us. The central government itself has moved a rate rationalization proposal. That is now clear. They're proposing 2 rates plus, of course, a third rate for select items. Now, what would your own expectation be in order for us to ensure revenue neutrality, but also deliver on the government's promise of accessibility, affordability, and higher consumption, Abhishek?
I think greasing the wheels of commerce is on the cards, and that is very clearly evident in the morning's speech of the Honorable Prime Minister. I think as far as the rate rationalization is concerned, one is, of course, the number crunching. The second is also the lot of these debates which are going around classification disputes and court disputes, etc. So I think one is the tax certainty which comes with the rate rationalization, and we must not ignore that because litigation cost remains a huge cost when these classification disputes come up. And we have seen a lot of huge amount of litigation due to this classification dispute. So I think ease of doing business, which is also on the card, would come into play while this rate rationalization comes into play in effect. So I think as far as I am expecting, the 5% would not go to a very high rate. It could become perhaps 6. Most of these essential commodities from 12% would come to 6% because it is the need of the hour that essential commodities are taxed at a lower rate. 18 may become 16 so that, there is some sort of consumption-driven pattern is seen in the economy. This greasing is important because, the consumption drive happens, domestic demand may go with price sensitivity. So I think that may happen, 18 may come down to 16, and I think 28, unfortunately, may go to 30 or 32. So I think that's what the expectation is. But I think overall, it's very important because economy gets a shot in the arm with this rate reduction. And I think overall, it will be good for all sectors, including consumers.
Have you done an assessment on revenue neutrality if we were to move 5 to 6 and 18 down to 16 and 28 to 33 or 35?
So I think, yes, the arithmetic is there because, see, some of these products from 12 would go to 16. And some of the most of these products from 5 goes to 6. If we see the calculation from 18% to 16%, while it's a 10% reduction from 18%, 1.8% is 10%. The revenue impact will not be much because there will be a lot of chains of credits which are there. So it is the tax on the value addition. But the overall perspective, which looks the moment the tax comes down from 18%, and in the morning we were discussing about services like health and insurance services. The moment that 18% comes down to 16%, I think there will be a more optimistic outlook towards the sector, towards different services and towards the economy at large. So I think from that perspective, number crunching will be on some of these important items and essential items as well. including the 28%, which also forms comparatively a major chunk of revenue collection, may go to 32%. But yes, what happens to cement sectors like, these will have to be looked into very closely, because cement certainly cannot go, it cannot actually sustain at 28%. In fact, it must come down to 18% or 16%, whatever that standard rate remains. So I think those key changes will have to be made. And as far as the number crunching is concerned, today we must not compare the revenue collection with 2 lakh crores which we are making. I think the collection must be from the perspective of from where we started, which was around 90,000 to a lakh. So I think even if the collection dips a bit, I don't think it would be a very worrisome approach or a worrisome aspect for the government, because in the long run, the consumption kicks in and the demand kicks in, and again, the revenue will go up.
Mr. Shah, would you agree with that, perhaps what we could undershoot on in terms of revenue could be offset by a boost in consumption? And, to the rate structure that we just heard there from Abhishek, would that be something that you would concur with? And, my concern is that just as we saw with the 28% slab, it was meant to be on select items, luxury goods and thin goods, and then it expanded to include all kinds of things, including things like cement. Is that the concern that you may have with the select items that has been specified by the government?
There are enough studies, Shereen, to suggest that GST has not impacted consumption. We have studies done by enough research groups to show that consumption has increased, which directly has reflected in the revenue. To blame GST for any dip in consumption is incorrect, number one. Number two, the government will be concerned about revenue. I mean, Abhishek has mentioned about 90,000 crores, 1 lakh crores being kosher. I would not agree. I mean, at this point of time, the government certainly will be looking at it, and how much will consumption make up for this reduction in revenue is a moot, debatable point. Yes, the likelihood of consumption increase cannot be ruled out, but that's an unknown currently. Thirdly, as regards the select goods, I wish there's urgent clarity on that, because that will be a lot of concern on what these goods are, and whether there's going to be expanded again to make up for the possible loss of revenue. I hope not, because clearly this 28% was meant to be for a very small quantity of goods, all of which were to also have this cess to take care of the states. Now, the unknown player in this entire scenario are the states. So the GST Council will really need to sit to them and do a lot of number crunching to ensure that they are assured that this will not result in loss of revenue for them.
Yes, that will certainly be the case, and we're given to understand that 2 meetings could perhaps take place in September of the council. But let me bring in MS Money into the conversation as well. Many thanks for joining us. 2 rate standard merit plus a select item rate. So effectively, it's a 3-rate structure. Mani, what would your expectation be on the possible permutation and combination of the standard merit and select item rate?
Thanks for having me on the show, Shereen. It's a pleasure. I'll just step back a bit and mention, while we have seen quite a bit of speculation on what items can go up, what items can go down, there is, I believe, a larger objective that we need to be cognizant here. And that is the fact that in all the advanced economies, all the developed economies, they have essentially a 2-rate structure. And this is something which was discussed even prior to GST being introduced. At that point of time, we were told that we need to have a 3-rate structure because of our specific needs as a country. But then it became a 4-rate structure with some additional rates for items like jewelry and diamond, etc. So today, the structure that we have, is it just a 3-rate, 4-rate structure? No, it's a 3-rate, 4-rate structure with a lot of other specific rates for specific products as well. From this, what is the ideal way for us to proceed? One way would have been to go from 4 to 3 and 3 to 2. And the delight that I have today is we are already talking of moving to a 2-rate structure, which is exactly what all the advanced economies have. You have one rate which is in respect of everything and another rate which is in respect of the essential goods only, which are typically the common man, goods. Now, to my mind, therefore, whether 5 will move up to 6 or 5 will move up to, 7, becomes a little germane to the whole conversation. The larger issue is, even assuming 5 moves up to 6 or 7, if 28 comes down to 18, or if 28 comes down to 24, and 18 and 12 get merged to a 16 or 15 or 17, that to me is a great, development from two perspectives. One is the fact that we are progressing towards an ideal structure mandated by all the developed countries like Canada and EU and others. The second is the fact that when we move to fewer rates, we are going to have a lot of classification disputes which get nipped in the bud. GST audits are going to become far simpler because there is no question of anyone doing a rate arbitrage when you have just a two rate structure. The third is, with the two rate structure again, input tax credit provisions need to be rationalized so that the two rate structure leads to businesses getting the relevant input tax credit without any hassles. So when I look at a two rate structure, to me, the specific rate that will come, is it going to be 16 or is it going to be 17 or is it going to be 6, is something maybe we can wait. That may be in the works. But the larger issue is having a two rate structure alone is a great matter of delight for all businesses, coming more so on Independence Day.
Right. Mr. Shah, let me also get you in on this conversation. Just want to understand, on the administrative side, on implementing this thing, you said it's interesting that it's coming from the center, not from the GOM. The clear thrust is to do it as soon as possible. Prime Minister promising a double dhamaka on Diwali. Your outlook in terms of executing this, there are 2 meetings in September?
Well, a lot of work will be required. Numbers will have to be presented to the GST Council. The GST Council will need to be assured that they will not have a severe impact on revenue. Obviously, the belief is that any reduction in rates will be more than offset by consumption. They ought to be, again, assured on that aspect, that consumption as borne by data has not declined because of GST and is likely to continue to be on the increase. What this two-rate structure will also mean that there's more money in the hands of the consumers, which means they can spend more. The industry will have to be cognizant that they will have to necessarily ensure reduction in prices, which is something the government also will be looking at with reduction in rates, that the benefit is being passed on to the consumers, because again, that will be a trigger for spurring in consumption. So there's a lot of work to be done by the center, and they have to be driving. So the finance ministry has its work cut out in the 2 or 3 GST Council meetings before Diwali, when they can arrive at a firm consensus as to what the rates ought to be. Administratively, again, GST will have to be on board to ensure that they're able to technologically and make all the necessary changes. We always forget the GST is the critical part in the entire administrative setup in terms of ensuring ease of doing business. So we need to keep them on board right through the discussion process so that they make the necessary changes as and when required urgently.
Mr. Shah, what's also important to note this time around is that Diwali is earlier. So we're not talking about November, we're talking about October itself. So it's going to be an ambitious task for the GST Council to move ahead with this rate rationalization and reform exercise to move towards implementation in October, which is the timeline that's been set by the Prime Minister. But very quickly, I want to understand from you, Mr. Shah, because you were at the helm of the CBEC when the GST was being rolled out. And at that point in time, I do remember that there were many conversations on the revenue neutral rate, but also, the slab structure. When and if there was a consideration of a two-rate structure, can you share with us what the thinking was then in terms of rates?
Had a revenue neutral rate of around 15-16%. The Arvind Subramanian Committee, the National Institute of Public Finance Policy had also come out with a rate. So we broadly knew that 16% is the rate which will ensure that the government continues to get the same amount of revenue as it was in pre-GST. Having said that, obviously, it was a non-starter. We had to be cognizant of the political sensibilities and the political economy. So having said that again, we ideally would have liked as a tax administrator to have minimum number of rates. But having said that, थाली के सामान में ensure करो कि आप 5% में रखते हो. You ensure that you keep those goods which are in the common man's thali at a lower rate. So we had a 0% for a lot of products which necessarily had to be there, or 5% which were supposed to be the rates for mass consumption goods. We then came to this, what should be the next rates of structure. 12 literally came in the course of all the discussions because we realized that we can't put too many goods in the 18% bracket. So it became yet another structure there of 12%. We constantly kept looking at the consumption patterns to look at how the revenue is going to play out. Hence, we had to have another rate which came into 18. In the course of the council meeting, if you remember, the states were extremely concerned with loss of revenue. So we had to then arrive again at some sort of a agreement as to how we're going to compensate that loss. And much as GST was bringing into its fold all cesses, we ended up introducing yet another cess in the form of a compensation cess. But we kept a timeline to say that, look, ensure that you do not cross this timeline and get all your administrative machinery to speed so that you will not lose any money because of GST having coming. So the compensation cess came in. It was to sit on top of the 28% because this constant belief that aerated waters, tobacco, and the like have to be taxed at a higher slab. So that became 28%, and the cess was to sit on top of that, which was a huge amount of tax at the end of it all. So that's how it happened. There was a constant discussion on the juggling the contradictory requirements of revenue, an ideal tax administration setup where we have minimum number of rates, because we knew the more number of rates are going to be the classification, inverted tax structure, the flow of credit, all will become issues which will necessarily follow with multiple rates. But that's how it was. And I'm happy that we are moving now towards a lesser number of slabs.
And a lot of the process that you spoke of will have to be something that the CBIC, the Finance Ministry, and of course state bureaucracy look at as they get into the next round of discussion and deliberations. But Mr. Shah, I want to point out that we're talking also in the context of this U.S. tariff threat of 50%, which comes into effect from the 27th of August at this point in time, unless things change. And I was having a conversation with Amitabh Kant, and his belief was that, never let a crisis go to waste, and this would be the best time to go in for big bang GST reforms and a whole host of other measures to ease the ease of doing business and so on and so forth. Here's Amitabh Kant. In fact, he categorically said that we should move to a two-rate structure. Let's listen in, and then I'll get wrap-up comments.
So this is, to my mind, a massive opportunity for reforms. We should use this opportunity to make our GST very simple, just 2 slabs. We should use this opportunity to simplify our personal tax. We should use this opportunity to remove a lot of quality control orders that we have put in and actually impacted trade liberalization. We should use this opportunity to reduce taxes on inputs and components so that we become an integral part of global value chains. And we should use this opportunity to clean up our cities so that, we become a great travel and tourism destination.
Well, that's Amitabh Kant, and that was the thrust of the Prime Minister's address to the nation: self-reliance, GST reforms, ease of doing business, the thrust of the Prime Minister's speech. Wrap-up comments, Mani, I'll start by asking you, the thrust and the focus now is going to be on ensuring that we have a revenue-neutral rate that is that takes care of any revenue concerns and considerations, but more importantly, the thrust that's required for consumption. What would your best guess be at this point in time on what we could be moving towards?
See, I think everyone has pointed out that when GST being an indirect tax, the moment the rate of tax goes down and the consumption goes up, we really don't need to be too worried about a revenue impact. The revenues have been robust over the last 6 months to a year. So I don't think that's a very big area to focus. It's an area of concern, certainly. But to me, the larger thing is the next 2-3 months are going to be very important from a GST reform perspective. And it is essential to get businesses involved in this. Because bear in mind that every time there is a GST discussion or a GST change that happens, generally it comes into effect on an immediate basis or within a few days. Most businesses have to do a lot of changes in their pricing system, in their IT systems, in their SAP. They have to take a lot of precautions in respect of their transactions with vendors. GST is an interconnected system which functions through a common pipe all across. All of these changes will take time. And therefore, while it is excellent that we are moving to the next stage of GST reforms, we should take businesses into confidence. Not only the impacted businesses, because the announcements made today indicated, at least to me, that this is going to impact all businesses. It's not going to be in respect of businesses who are at 28 or 18. It is going to impact businesses, big time all across. So makes sense to take them into confidence as we go along over the next 2 months. Between now and Diwali, we don't have honestly much time. They should also be prepared, they should also be stakeholders, and they should be able to see the benefit it brings to their business in terms of easier classification, more input tax credit, and easier compliances.
Right. It's been an engaging discussion. There's a lot of questions that need to be unpacked that perhaps the Finance Ministry will be able to throw more light on. We'll continue our coverage of course, this evolving issue, trying to learn more from the North Block, from the Finance Ministry on what this structure may look like, what the classification issues will be like. Short timeline as well, an early Diwali this year. So a lot on the cards for the next couple of months. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us, sharing their insights. I'd also like to thank Timsy and Shereen for posing some questions on trying to get more clarity on what these issues will translate into moving forward. But that's all the time that we have. It's a wrap on our special broadcast on Independence Day. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18 for more news and updates.